So when did this shift in America start? Was it with George Floyd? When did it really start taking hold in in this modern
Right.
day?
So it's a little complicated. I mean, it's kind of unfolded in layers or in stages, I guess. It took over in academia, in certain sectors of academia, pretty early on, maybe even through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But it was always kind of like in kind of a little bubble. Most of academia ignored it, which allowed it to fester. Through the through the early 2000s or so, it really started to grow in the academic sector. But I think the first big breakout of the mentality into the pop culture took place, and there are a series of events that I'm going to kind of go through quickly, but and I don't want to get too much into the weeds with them. But one of the first big places it broke into the mainstream was when Barack Obama got elected president. There was definitely a racist reaction to that. I don't know what the actual scope of that was, but I remember being told by the media, for example, that it was extraordinary. That, this huge racist reaction happened everywhere to the election of Barack Obama. And so, this idea that America was secretly more racist than we knew was forwarded, and that's a critical race theory idea. It was forwarded through the media pretty strongly in 2008. Then we have this gigantic financial collapse, and all of the banks get bailed out, and all of this crazy stuff happens, and we end up with this gigantic movement on the left. I'm not even talking about the Tea Party on the right, which is getting branded as that like super racist secret undercurrent of America. It's the Tea Party. On the left, we have this giant Occupy Wall Street movement that's taking on the banks, and finally the Tea Partiers start kind of like joining up with them, left and right working together. That's bad for business. If you're the people in charge, you can't have them working together. And so they unleash, and you can read this from so many people who were leaders in the Occupy movement or who were present in the Occupy movement. They unleashed identity politics into it. And in fact, the banks started to finance that. Vivek Ramaswamy wrote a book called Woke Inc. a few years ago and details how the banks used woke identity politics explicitly in 2011 and 12 to really, really, really push the Occupy movement to the margins of its effectiveness, to split it up from within, and it worked. And so now all of a sudden, the big entities that are teaming up with the government, the banks, there's this revolving door between the government and the big corporations and the banks, and we all know that it's not good. That's what the Occupy Wall Street movement was about. Well, all of a sudden, you have Barack Obama starts campaigning for his second term on identity politics explicitly. He didn't do that in the first term. Now he is, and these corporations and these politicians have this new thing, and what we would look at as woke identity politics, that works like a sword to bust up opposition and a shield. Oh, I'm morally virtuous. I'm on the side of the racial minorities. I'm on the side of the sexual minorities. I'm on the side of gay pride. I'm progressive. I'm good. You're bad. And so they end up funding a lot of this stuff massively because of its huge political utility in terms of a divide and conquer strategy against both traditional left and the kind of rising populist right. So that's 2012. That's a second huge step. 2014 and 15, we have Michael Brown died. He assaulted a police officer and was shot, and the Hands Up, Don't Shoot movement started. Black Lives Matter leapt into its first major public appearance. Black Lives Matter started formally after Trayvon Martin had it was shot by George Zimmerman. Didn't do much. It was somewhat grassroots, got co opted. The early leaders of BLM will tell you it got co opted by these weird actors. We find out later that these people consider themselves to be explicit, trained Marxists. And in 2015, all through the year, Black Lives Matter kind of pushes this idea of a racist society and racist cops. And then for 5 or 6 years, we have this just kind of continuously drip fed to us. Donald Trump gets elected the next year, 2016. And what was the narrative? He's racist. He's racist. He's racist. He's sexist. He's terrible. He's this. He's that. Intersectional nightmare. Why did they do that? Because it mainlined back again, just like when Barack Obama got elected, this idea that there's a secret, deplorable, systemically racist, systemically sexist American society that we've turned a blind eye to for far too long. And the explanation, how on earth could Donald Trump have got elected, was that there are far more sexists, far more racists, and paradoxically far more homophobes. Trump being the first like openly pro-gay president, or guy to campaign for president openly pro-gay. somehow far more homophobes than we ever believed. And so America gets this shade thrown on it by these activists, but through the media in particular, in their attempt to destroy Trump, that America is secretly racist, sexist, homophobic, evil, blah, 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 to a level that we had never possibly considered before. And so at that point, the mentality behind critical identity Marxism had infused American society. So when George Floyd dies in 2020, also with the conditions of the pandemic causing everybody to be a bit crazy, um, it was as if they had spread black powder all over the ground, and then George Floyd died and somebody threw the match, and the whole country erupted into this direction where this is the only thing to do, the only way to do it, and everybody has to do it all at the same time. There's other aspects. I mean, it's been quietly creeping into the schools at least since the early 1990s, and after 2015 has been on a fast track. So you have this kind of groundwork being laid otherwise as well. It's a multifaceted question as to how it got into society. But I think if you take into account the bend in the entertainment industry, the bend in the schools, and then that kind of trajectory of taking advantage of certain gigantic sociocultural and political events to mainline the narratives, you can see how this kind of Marxist identity politics mentality infused itself into America, so that when George Floyd died, where it looks like the beginning, it's actually the beginning of the active phase, or the so called kinetic phase. Kinetic, I guess I said that wrong, of something that's been building for decades.